Chapter 896. Arrival. Several days later, the longships that belonged to Dao Kong gradually entered Black Ink Planet's territory. Dao Kong walked out of his room and stood at the bow of the ship with his hands behind his back and his hair over his shoulders. His sacred constellation robe shone with a light that was akin to the one emitted by rotating stars. Because of it, Dao Kong looked incredibly graceful at that moment. His handsome face filled with determination gave him a masculine beauty, and it had to be said that his current appearance was very fitting to his status. It was as if a large amount of kismet in the universe had gathered on his body, and he had the fortune to use quite a large portion of it, or else why would he be born as a direct descendant of Morning Dao sect, obtain a potential that was second to no one beside Yi Wang, and have an appearance that would make all those who saw him want to praise him? As he stood at the bow of the ship, the 9 old men stood behind him like shadows, but they had their eyes shut. However, with the help of starlight, a scene that could not be seen when they were in the room showed up. These 9 old men had their eyes shut, because they had been sewn tightly by thin threads. They looked like dolls whose eyes had been sewn shut. Black Ink Planet. Dao Kong smiled faintly as he looked at the indistinct planet in the distance. Slight anticipation grew in his heart, since this would be his final stop in the barren lands of divine essence. Once the auction ended, he would leave. He would no longer need to stay around here to keep an eye over this place. Instead, he could use the exit and head back to true Morning Dao world. By his side was the young married woman with pointy ears and a coquettish appearance. She stood there quietly with blank eyes. There was not a hint of emotion in them, and she looked like a puppet as well. There was a collar around her neck with 19 runic symbols on it. They were branded into the collar and appeared as bumps. Occasionally, they would shine, spreading out a freezing chill that could cause people's hearts to freeze. Longships moved through the galaxy like fish in water, stirring up layers of ripples around them as they got increasingly closer to Black Ink Planet. Once they had traveled through the area that belonged to Black Ink Planet for about the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, a sharp whistle rose in front of them. Along with that whistling sound came a pride of strange, lion-like beasts with 2 heads. As they roared, they traveled forward in a group that consisted of hundreds of them. A cultivator could be found sitting on each of the creatures' backs. These cultivators were dressed similarly and their eyes shone with brilliant light, creating a stark contrast against the thin and pathetic physiques of the other people outside Black Ink Planet in sinful barren lands. They were alert and full of energy, but showed not a single hint of respect towards the forces of power from the 4 great true worlds keeping an eye over the barren lands of divine essence. Instead, they used a calm attitude to greet all those who came to the planet. Who goes there? Say your name. How preposterous! We are the forces of power from the 4 great true worlds. How dare you criminals not bow and worship us? The arrogance contained in this voice was incredibly great, and a cold snort soon followed from one of the longships. The cultivators from Black Ink Planet smiled to each other when they heard these words, but their expressions soon became steely cold. Every single time they held Black Ink auction, these sort of ignorant fools would appear. This was related to their experience in being true guards. After all, around the barren lands of divine essence, the cultivators in all planets besides Black Ink Planet and Divine Essence Star Ocean were incredibly respectful when they saw them. With the system of the true guards from the 4 great true worlds changing shifts, it was not surprising for those not knowing the rules to appear. The leader of the cultivators from Black Ink Planet was an old man. He rolled his eyes before he speaking in a cold voice. Bring out your invitations. We are in charge of the first inspection. If you do not have an invitation, then we will kill you as we would any invaders. You're just mere cultivators of Black Ink. The cultivator who had snorted coldly just then in his longship was about to continue speaking, but his words were swiftly cut short. Immediately after, a gentle voice came from the longships, and an old man with a kindly and gentle face walked out. My subordinate has been ignorant. Fellow Taoists from Black Ink Planet, I hope that you will not mind. We are from true Morning Dao world, and in response to the invitation for Black Ink auction, we have come forth to attend the auction. This is our invitation. The old man brought out a jade slip from his bosom with a smile before he let go of his grip. The jade slip immediately charged towards the cultivators from Black Ink Planet. Once the old man who stood at the head caught it, he cast it a few scrutinizing glances before returning it and leading the hundreds of cultivators behind him to separate into 2 dies so as to make way for the group. The old man with the kind and gentle face wrapped his fist in his palm as thanks towards the people before he returned to his longship with a smile on his face. Soon, Dao Kong's vast fleet of longships headed into the distance through the path the cultivators from Black Ink Planet had cleared for them. Immediately notify our progenitor that the people from True Morning Dao World arrived. By the looks of it, Dao Kong should be among them as well, but we don't know the details. The old man leading the group of cultivators from Black Ink Planet narrowed his eyes. As a barely noticeable glint appeared in them, he sent a thought to the cultivator standing next to him. That cultivator immediately moved and turned into a long arc that disappeared without a trace. After a moment, in Black Ink Planet, Lai Shan Kangju once again arrived in the room in which Su Ming stayed. He stopped before him respectfully and bowed down. "My lord, the group from True Morning Dao World has arrived. They are currently beyond Black Ink Planet and are going through all the layers of inspection. We have already verified that Dao Kong is among one of the longships. He has 9 old men beside him, and they all have outstanding power. They should be at the peak of the middle stage of World Plane Realm, and judging by their looks, they seem to be skilled in coordinating their attacks. They should have a rune with them." Besides these 9 people, Dao Kong also brought 3,000 other cultivators. Each of them has outstanding power, and they should all be warriors who do not fear death. Also, according to our investigations, Dao Kong has run into 2 incredibly perilous situations over the 1,000-something years he was in the barren lands of Divine Essence. These dangers should have come from other true worlds, and one of them was something that would be impossible to survive through if he was not in the later stage of World Plane Realm, while the other would have surely brought death to all who were not above Lunar Kalpa Realm. However, during both times, he managed to survive without getting injured, hence we suspect that there is a cultivator who is at the very least in Lunar Kalpa Realm hidden by his side. As for Yi Wang, who you have asked us to pay attention to, he came alone to Black Ink Planet yesterday and is staying in Worldly Star City at the moment. All his actions are monitored by us, Lai Shan Kangju reported in a low voice. Once he finished speaking, he hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something else, but then decided not to continue. Su Ming was meditating with his eyes closed. Once he finished listening to Lai Shan Kangju's words, he slowly opened his eyes. His gaze was profound, preventing others from telling what he felt at the moment. "Continue," he said flatly. Lai Shan Kangju smiled awkwardly and lowered his head, then quickly said, My lord, those 2 pets of yours, the black and yellow dogs? I've also investigated them. They are currently also in Worldly Star City, and they got themselves an illustrated book from some place. There are plenty of weird things drawn in there. Also, the yellow dog is skilled in transformation. He has turned himself into an old man. He took that illustrated book and has been proclaiming all over the place that the items in the book are the items that will be put on auction. Quite a large number of these have been sold off during the past half a year." Lai Shan Kangju smiled wryly and brought out an illustrated book from his bosom and placed it before Su Ming respectfully. Su Ming picked up the book and flipped through it. As he did so, a frown gradually appeared between his brows. Once he finished flipping through the book, he let out a cold harumph and placed the book by his side. Those pictures were not the items that were going to be put on auction, since some of them were Su Ming's own enchanted treasures. However, the information and descriptions in the book were mostly of no relevance to the items themselves. In fact, there were even some illustrations of enchanted treasures that once belonged to the enemies Su Ming had fought against. That was half a year ago. What did they do before that? Su Ming lifted his head and cast a glance at Lai Shan Kangju. "This is... I have never seen such intelligent pets in my life. Half a year ago, they became Hua family's guests in Worldly Star City. A year ago, they built an auction hall in Ink Kirin City. 18 months ago, they became friends with Li Long, which is the dragon in Blackwater City's swamp, and took away with them some of its scales. 2 years ago, several small families in Black Ink Planet worked together to kill them. 30 months ago, they organized a formal marriage interview. The yellow dog turned into an incredibly beautiful woman, and then they blended themselves into several small families, and with all sorts of despicable methods, they looted an endless amount of crystals. 3 years ago, when they had just left your side, they found a small crystal mine that belonged to a small family. Su Ming was stunned as he listened to all the exploits. As Lai Shan Kangju continued recounting the tale, he could not help but have the non-malicious envy and admiration in his heart seep into his words. In fact, once Elder Feng learned about this, he let out a long sigh and said that if they had been in Black Ink Planet before us, then they might have become Black Ink Planet's true masters by now. When Lai Shan Kangju said these words, he cast Su Ming an odd look. Su Ming remained silent. After some time, he let out a dry cough and said, "Make arrangements for Dao Kong to enter Blackwater City, and we will act according to plan." Understood. Lai Shan Kangju immediately bowed to him, then got up and left. Once Lai Shan Kangju left, Su Ming's room immediately fell silent, and his expression instantly turned dark. He picked up the illustration book and looked at it carefully. When he thought of Lai Shan Kangju talking about the things that the bald crane and the abyss dragon had caused during the past 3 years, he could not help but smile wryly in resignation. Yu Ru was by his side. For the first time since she followed Su Ming, her elegant expression changed. She covered her mouth as if she was trying to hold back her laughter, but in the end, her body started quivering uncontrollably and her laughter echoed in the air. "Young master, it is said that pets are like their masters. I wonder if this is true for you." Yu Ru chuckled softly and cast Su Ming a glance. This was the first time she saw him smiling wryly in resignation. That big yellow dog of mine should have the figures of a number of women in its memories, but based on what I understand of it, those figures from the distant past should have already become faded images in its head. Then whose form do you think it would have taken for that marriage interview? Su Ming asked faintly. Once those words left his mouth, Yu Ru's expression changed, and a murderous aura instantly appeared in her beautiful eyes. Su Ming stood up and swung his arm to adjust his sleeves before he walked towards the door. The auction was just around the corner, and the plan was going to be set in motion at any moment. Before that, he would go and check on the bald crane and the abyss dragon, then would go to Worldly Star Planet to see an old friend of his, Yi Wang. Chapter 897. The Two Fiends. The Crane and the Black Worldly Star Planet was a city with a beautiful name. It would usually cause people to think of a region that was akin to a starry sky the first time they heard of the city. Yet in truth, this was a desert. This so-called city was really just an oasis in the desert, a place with fresh water surrounded by tents. This was Worldly Star City during the day, a desert whose end could not be seen. The oases, which looked like embellishments, made it seem as if the desert still had some form of life. Quite a large number of cultivators could be seen meditating or moving in and out of the tents. This did not seem like a city, but was more like a gigantic and disorderly market. The scorching sun sent heat to the ground, and even the sand was blazing hot. In this vast land, no end could be seen, so no one could feel boxed in, but if they stared into the distance for a prolonged period of time, they would still become agitated. Because of this, Worldly Star City was also commonly known as the City of Frustration during the day. However, when night fell, everything in the area would become like a mirage. Every little thing would be different, and the change was so great that the person who saw it for the first time would be left greatly astonished. When it was night, the sky was bright with brilliant starlight. After being trapped in heat for an entire day, the sand looked like it had melted, revealing large stones that stood in an orderly manner on the ground. There was also a watery blue screen that looked like an illusion spread over the land. Anyone who stood on it would feel a refreshing sensation under their feet, as if they were stepping on fresh water. The tents shone with a light that gave the area a quiet and serene feel, as if the light from the sky had gathered on the ground and turned into solid, triangular structures. At the top of the tents were pillars of light that rose into the sky, and the number of tents corresponded with the number of light pillars. The pillars of light looked like they were connected to the sky. As they intersected with each other, they formed silver streams that connected them together as well as the sky and earth. These silver streams functioned as lines that formed illusory palaces in the dark sky. There were endless palaces that looked like they were illusions but also looked incredibly real. If someone walked over and touched them with their hands or used their divine senses to perceive them, they would find that the palaces really existed. In this seemingly boundless desert, when night arrived, walls would appear out of nowhere and surround the area. It would seem as if the place had turned into a city which existed in the mortal world and was home to emperors. If anyone looked from the sky, they would find that the silver streams and palaces formed an incredibly beautiful picture. That picture was like the sky that could only exist in heaven, and was beautiful without equal. Those who looked from the sky would find themselves looking at the same sight as those who looked from the ground. As the streams of light intersected with each other, they formed a picture in which the stars and the world existed in the same level and formed the city that was known as Worldly Star City. During the night, Worldly Star City was incredibly lively. Plenty of cultivators came and went all around, and this city could be said to even be a little more prosperous than Blackwater City. Right then, since Black Ink Auction was just around the corner, the number of cultivators present had also increased. Su Ming walked amid the crowd. Behind him was Yu Ru, who followed him with a veil covering her features. Her face remained cold and aloof all along the way to the city, but the murderous aura in her eyes was incredibly great. Every single time she thought of the big yellow dog changing into her appearance and marrying someone, even she who was always quiet and elegant could not help but pull her hair out in frustration. If Su Ming had not been around, she would have sent her divine sense outwards a long time ago to search for the two dogs at any cost. Have you heard about it? The dual fiends, the crane and the black have appeared again. As the two of them walked forward, Su Ming's expression suddenly changed. He turned his head and looked into the distance. There was an inn in that direction, and there was a clamor coming from there. Inside the establishment there was a table, and around it were three cultivators who were talking to each other with enraged expressions. Damn it, do you mean that big yellow dog and the woman who called herself Grandpa Crane? That's right. Who else could I be talking about? That woman who calls herself Grandpa Crane is definitely an androgynous human, or else why would she call herself Grandpa Crane? She was the one who brought that despicable yellow dog with her in the past, and several dozens of small families were enraged because of them. Hey, Brother Wang, I remember that you also attended that marriage interview, didn't you? Don't ever mention it again. That woman is my mortal enemy. But honestly speaking, that woman does indeed have an incredibly beautiful face. I saw her once. If she wasn't that beautiful, it would have been impossible for the direct descendants of several dozen families to go mad for her. It's said that there were even a few of them who did everything they could to see her up close and become familiar with her. HMH, your news is outdated. Based on what I know, several people indeed saw her and became close to her, and after that they were all completely head over heels for her, or else why would the dual fiends have been able to take away so many crystals? I saw that woman before as well. She is definitely a woman of absolute beauty. She's so beautiful, so why is she doing things like this? She could just go to any middle-tier family, and all of them would take her in. In fact, even the greatest families here would value such a gorgeous woman highly. If she practiced seduction arts, she would definitely become incredibly powerful. As Su Ming listened, his expression became strange, and he glanced at Yu Ru sideways. At that moment, she was already so angry that she was trembling, and the murderous aura in her eyes had become incredibly thick. In fact, the area around her was now freezing cold. She took a swift step forward and turned into a wisp of green smoke that appeared in the inn. Su Ming smiled wryly, but did not stop her. He saw Yu Ru stepping into the inn, and at the instant she moved in, the place instantly turned cold, so she immediately attracted everyone's attention. When the people saw Yu Ru, who still had a veil over her face, they were stunned for a moment, but some of them soon sported drastic changes to their expressions. In fact, some of them even stood up swiftly to stare intently at her with slight uncertainty on their faces. It was especially so for the three people who had been talking among themselves just moments ago. Their expressions were slowly twisting as they stared at her. A burst of hatred that could burn the sky rose up swiftly. However, it was suppressed within as it turned into a hint of uncertainty. Yu Ru looked at the people's expressions around her and immediately felt great dismay. She had originally harbored a hint of doubt in her heart that it might not be her they were talking about, but most of it had disappeared at that moment. Yet she was still slightly unwilling to accept reality, which was why she decided to lift her veil right in front of the crowd. When she revealed her beautiful face and all the people saw it, enraged roars rose up like a windstorm in the inn. The dual fiends, the crane and the black. It's the dual fiend. Damn it! How dare you appear here? Return to me my crystals. Those are my crystals. I was prepared to buy an enchanted treasures with those crystals. Why you? I will not rest until you die." Crazed roars echoed in the air, and there were quite a large number of cultivators who rushed out to attack her. The murderous aura in Yu Ru's eye instantly reached its strongest. She no longer had a single hint of doubt within her that damned yellow dog had taken her appearance. In fact, even the waiter in the inn had bloodshot eyes when he saw her. He brought an axe from some place and charged towards her while growling, "Damn it, it's you! You're the one who cheated me off my crystals." When Yu Ru saw the cultivators rushing towards her, she lifted her hand and swung it outwards. All the cultivators' bodies in the inn froze, then tumbled backwards. Banging sounds echoed in the air, and all the cultivators coughed up blood as they fell back, and this was after Yu Ru had forced down her killing intent. With a cold harumph, she turned around and walked out of the inn before disappearing without a trace. In fact, she did not even bother about Su Ming. Instead, once she walked out of the inn, she immediately spread her divine sense outwards, sweeping through the entire worldly star city in search for the two dogs whom she could not wait to kill 1,000 times. Su Ming smiled wryly and shook his head. He saw Yu Ru scanning the entire city with her divine sense for a moment, then moving towards the distance in the form of a long arc with murderous aura raging around her. Once he saw this, he sighed and followed after her. In a corner of worldly star city was an old man putting on a solemn air. As he stroked his beard, he looked at the two middle-aged men before him with a grin on his face. "Ahem, my fellow Taoists, I can only let you see the first 3 pages in the illustrated book. If you want to take the entire thing with you, then you will need to pay me 500 crystals," the old man said in a slow and calm manner. There was a big yellow dog lying sprawled by his feet, and it was glaring at the two middle-aged men. Occasionally, it would let out a threatening low growl, as if it wanted to rush forward to rip apart the two men. Every single time its anger was about to reach its most ferocious state, the old man would kick it, and the yellow dog's rage would diminish slightly. After a moment, the two middle-aged men took the illustrated book and left, and the old man counted the crystals once again. A smug expression appeared on his face, then he lowered his head and said to the yellow dog, "I've already told you plenty of times that you should only be fierce when you need to, and when you shouldn't be fierce, you must be gentle.
YU. Fine.
This time, I'll take away 1/3 of your profits." "How dare you?" The big yellow dog immediately stood up like a man and glared at the old man fiercely. The old man immediately put a smile on his face and walked forward to hug the yellow dog. "Ha ha. Us dudes. Ack, don't bite me. Fine, the both of us, okay? The both of us. The both of us can settle this easily among ourselves. I won't cut your profits, all right?" The old man swung his arm over the dog's shoulder, and a thick, uncouth air immediately appeared around its body. "I'm telling you, we have to occasionally show up as the dual fiends, the crane and the black. Only then will we continue to be popular. This identity is very good for us, you know? The more popular we are, the more shock we will create whenever we go out." The old man cackled in a low voice and walked away with the yellow dog. Yet he only took a couple steps when his body suddenly trembled, and he quickly cast a sideways glance at the yellow dog. When he saw that the yellow dog still looked the same as usual, various thoughts immediately raced in its head. Its cultivation base has been damaged badly, and it's normal that it didn't manage to notice it. Ahem, Big Brother Abyss Dragon. The old man immediately lowered his back, making it seem as if the dog was his superior. The yellow dog was taken aback by this scene. The old man bent his back even more, and with an obsequious look, he started saying in a submissive and soft-spoken manner, "Honestly, I have always had a question in my mind. Big Brother Abyss Dragon, you see, I've always been very cautious and attentive in my work when I was with you during the past 3 years, so why don't you tell me something?" Before the yellow dog could speak, the old man continued, "About that, why did you force me to become the beautiful, gentle, kind, unparalleled, adorable big sister Yu Ru who has my utmost respect from the bottom of my heart and whom I think is 1,000,000,000,000 times more brilliant than that Su Ming? You must know that I have always regretted this in the depths of my heart for the past 3 years. In fact, it's something that's been tormenting me. I didn't want to turn into her, but why did you force me to change into her?" When finished, The old man crouched down and wrapped his hands around his head before he started crying in misery. The yellow dog was stunned speechless. At that moment, a chilling air filled the remote area, and within it a voice could be heard. It sounded like a volcano about to erupt. Dual fiends. Chapter 898. Old friend. The bald crane shuddered, and it wept even more forlornly. As it wept, it began shouting and screaming loudly. Big brother Abyss Dragon, oh, you knew that I had lived a bitter life during the past 3 years. I always felt that I had let big sister Yu down, so why did you have to force me? I know that your master is Yu Xian, and she has an ambiguous relationship with Su Ming. That's why you found big sister Yu disagreeable. With this in mind, you forced pitiful old me to listen to your words. But I didn't want this to happen. I remember now, you changed in big sister Yu as well. If the yellow dog still did not understand what was going on, then it would have wasted all it had experienced in its life. It might be heavily injured and not as cunning and quick-witted as the bald crane, but how could it not understand that the damned bald crane was pushing all the responsibility on it? Especially when that chilling and sinister voice was still echoing in the air. There was even a woman walking towards them threateningly with a monstrous murderous aura. Damn you, bald crane! The yellow dog roared in anger and kicked the bald crane, who let out a shrill scream of pain and fell backwards as it coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. When it fell on the ground, it struggled a few times, like it was about to breathe its last. Then, it turned its head with great effort to look at the woman walking towards them. Big sister. I'm sorry. Once it finished speaking, its eyes rolled back, and it stopped moving. I'll fight you to the bitter end. The big yellow dog's face was filled with grief, and as if it had gone mad, its body transformed, and it turned into an abyss dragon that was several times smaller than its regular size. However, there were numerous wounds on its body, and it did not even have a dragon tendon, so it exuded a miserable air even after it had transformed back. In fact, there were even some wounds on its body that started bleeding because they had been torn apart by the dragon's agitation. This appearance was enough to make all people's expressions change. The dragon rushed forward and charged towards Yu, but when it was in the air, it suddenly started laughing brokenly. Blood gushed out from many of its wounds at the same time, and its body plunged down from the air. When it fell on the ground, it coughed up a lot of blood. Master, you told me to flee before you fell asleep and ordered me to not change into an abyss dragon again, because I have been wounded too badly. If I changed back, I would surely die. I listened to you and changed into a yellow dog. But now, since I cannot escape death, then I will die as an abyss dragon. Even if I die, I will be an abyss dragon of the world. In its anguish, the abyss dragon trembled, and the aura of death instantly filled its body. It started swiftly rotting away, and then, the dragon closed its eyes and breathed its last. Yu, who was seething with monstrous anger and murderous aura from her desire to kill the two fiends, paused in her footsteps. Stunned, she looked at the bald crane and the abyss dragon with a dumbfounded gaze. This scene was completely out of her expectations. She had not thought that everything would end in such a manner. In fact, she was a little unclear as to who exactly had taken her form. She had very clearly heard that the yellow dog was skilled in transformation, but based on what she saw right then, the yellow dog seemed to be very honest and well-behaved. With her level of cultivation, she could tell with just one glance that the abyss dragon had truly died. Its body and soul had been destroyed because it had been injured too badly, and when the dragon returned to its real form, it could no longer bear with the wounds and died. This was real. It was not fake. The density of the aura of death and the decay on its body made Yu slightly unable to think. In a daze, she turned her gaze towards the bald crane, which had entered an even more advanced stage of death. She could not help but recall the bald crane's words before it died, the words of regret that sounded incomparably sincere and exuded an honest repentance. They left her in a daze. The abyss dragon's dignified death-seeking act also left Yu slightly envious of its master. How could this be? Yu had brought with her rage and murderous aura, but now, all those emotions had turned into something she couldn't describe. In silence, she stood where she was for a long time before sighing, then turning around and leaving. When she left, the abyss dragon and the bald crane's carcasses continued decaying, as if the endless passage of time had increased its flow by several times for a short amount of time at the moment they died. Su Ming walked out from the darkness and stood beside the bald crane and the abyss dragon's carcasses, then sighed. Yu Ru might have outstanding power and had lived for a long time, but her experiences in life could not compare to Su Ming's. The ups and downs she experienced in her life were also something that she could not hope to compare to his struggles. Besides, she did not understand the bald crane. Su Ming, however, did, and so much so that this understanding towards the crane had already been etched into his soul. He looked at the two carcasses on the ground and shook his head. Quite a realistic performance. He smiled wryly, then turned around and left. At the same time, two middle-aged men wearing straw hats and long robes strode around through another corner of Worldly Star City. If anyone looked at the faces underneath the straw hats, they would find that one of them had an uncouth look, while the other had an incredibly dignified expression on his face, but in the depths of that dignified expression was a hint of an uncouth expression that corrupted that dignified look. Heh, isn't the great-grandpa Crane amazing? You're amazing. Isn't the great-grandpa Crane awesome? You're awesome. Ha ha. That lassie Yu Ru didn't expect that we've thought about this when we pretended to be her in the past. Heh, I threw her off. My plan will be called Throwing Yu Ru Off. One of the 3 scales our boss Li Long gave us can hide our presence so that we won't be discovered, while the other 2 can turn into our clones. Unless the person's level of cultivation surpasses our boss Li Long's, then it would be impossible for them to notice us. Heh, I'm smart, right? Let me tell you, we had to occasionally show up as the dual fiends because of this day. Look, the matter is settled now, isn't it? But Baldy, I've been meaning to ask you this. Why are we known as the dual fiends, the crane and the black? It should be the dual fiends, the crane and the yellow, right? Ahem, let's not talk about this for now. Xiao Huang, you reacted a little too slowly just then. When I addressed you as Big Brother Abyss Dragon, you were stunned for a moment. Even though you were supposed to be stunned based on what we've rehearsed, you've been stunned for too long. It was too fake. Also, I remember that the final I'll fight you to the bitter end wasn't in the rehearsal. Why you? Do you know that improvising is really dangerous? Oh well, based on our agreement in the past, I helped you ruin her reputation. Now, you have to work together with me and give me all your crystals. You also promised me that all your treasures in the Emperor of Abyss True World will be mine. The 2 middle-aged men were naturally the bald crane and the abyss dragon. The bald crane's transformation art was strong enough to transform the abyss dragon into all sorts of shapes. At that moment, as the 2 of them mumbled to each other, they walked into the distance. However, in the mid of their excitement, they did not notice that Su Ming was watching them from the distance with a wry smile on his face. In the dark night when the stars and moon hung high in the sky, the bald crane and the abyss dragon left. Yu Ru, too, left to an unknown direction, bringing with her all her complicated emotions. Su Ming was by himself now, only accompanied by the Duke of Crimson Flame, who had turned into a totem on his arm. He shook his head and turned around, walking unhurriedly through the silver streams of Worldly Star City. Occasionally, some cultivators would pass by him. There would always be some who would lower their heads when they saw him and put on barely noticeable expressions of respect. Some of these people were members of the Lai Shan family, and some of them were people who had affiliated themselves to berserkers. They might not know Su Ming, but they could sense the vague mighty pressure aimed towards berserkers coming from him. Besides, due to Su Ming's status, he was secretly protected by members of the Lai Shan family and other berserkers wherever he went in Black Ink Planet. These people were in all corners of Worldly Star Planet. In fact, the Hua family within Worldly Star Planet was also under strict surveillance. They had obtained some hints that left their progenitor so shocked that he came out from isolation to personally issue an order to all members of his family that they were forbidden from venturing outside. The powerful warriors within the family then were on constant alert, telling all the guests within the Hua family to not go out of their rooms on that night. The lesson of Tai Ci family had made them, unwilling to provoke any people they couldn't afford to provoke or offend anyone they should not offend due to some accident. After the time it takes for 2 incense sticks to burn, a man walked towards Su Ming. He paused for an instant when he was beside Su Ming and respectfully handed him a jade slip. There was a hint of a zealous look in his eyes, but just as he was about to bid his farewell and leave, Su Ming said faintly, "I like peace and quiet." The man immediately voiced his obedience and left respectfully. Su Ming cast his gaze on the jade slip, reading the mark of where Yi Wang was staying at that moment. Once Su Ming cast a glance at it, he crushed the jade slip and walked slowly towards his lodgings. Gradually, the number of cultivators before him decreased, and in time, not a single cultivator could be seen in the silver streams he stepped. Compared to the loud hubbub in the other silver streams, the path Su Ming took was incredibly quiet. However, no one paid any attention to this place. For if they did, someone would immediately move forward from the dark and monitor their every moment. But Su Ming did not pay any attention to this. He liked peace and quiet, and hence, the Lai Shan family gave him peace and quiet. Su Ming continued walking for an hour. He was not in a hurry, and he continued walking until a tower appeared in front of him. This was an inn liked by all cultivators. There was an individual rune in every single room which filled them with spiritual aura. At this point in time, the place should have been incredibly lively, but right then, the inn was silent. Not a single person could be found in the hall. In fact, the near 100 rooms that had originally been filled with cultivators had been completely emptied, except for one, Yi Wang's. The silence around him created a stark contrast with bustle of activity that could be heard from the distance. With a calm expression, Su Ming walked to the door of the inn, went up the stairs, strolled to the end of the second floor, and stopped in front of a room. He lifted his hand, placed it on the door, and knocked on it lightly. Knock, knock, knock. "Sir, you sent away all the cultivators in this place and made it so that not a single sound could be heard within a circular area of 100 lees. If you can do such a thing in this lively worldly star city when Black Ink Auction is just around the corner, then you are definitely someone of status and power. There is no need for someone like you to knock on my door when you are outside my room," a cold and aloof voice said from the room. Not a single hint of emotion could be heard in it. Su Ming smiled faintly and said in a light tone, "How could I barge into an old friend's room?" When he said these words, the room immediately fell silent. After a long while, the door swung open silently, and a gaze filled with complicated emotions as well as disbelief fell on Su Ming from the person sitting by the table. It's been a long while. Chapter 899. Change. Su Ming had not said those words. Instead, it was said by the young man in white in a voice filled with mixed feelings. Su Ming saw that he was sitting beside the table when the door to his room opened without a sound. The young man looked quite handsome. He had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. There was a pride about him that seemed to come straight from his soul, and it was one that could not be dispelled. He was the same as how Su Ming had seen him the first time. He had that lonely but prideful air about him back then, and now, it was still the same. He was like a sharp sword that was about to be drawn out from its scabbard, existing in a state of equilibrium in which his brilliance was shown to the world but in which he also kept some of that brilliance within himself. This demeanor was enough to make all cultivators who saw Yi Wang unable to help themselves but to look upon him and pay attention to him. This was Yi Wang, the prodigy with the greatest potential in tens of thousands of years of immortal history. He was highly valued by Morning Dao sect and taken in as a successor disciple by the sect elder. He was the pride of the immortals, which was just like what he held within himself. He lived his life with that pride and his loneliness as his companion. His pride was born from his loneliness, and his loneliness was due to him being too outstanding, because no one by his side could compare to him. In Yi Wang's mind, the only thing that remained after all that he experienced in his life was a teenager he saw in the land of berserkers after he participated in the plan in the past. That had been the first time Yi Wang had fought to a tie against someone, and it could even be said that he had lost during that time. With his pride, there was only losing and winning in his life. There was no such thing as reaching a tie with someone else. When he was in the barren lands of divine essence, he saw Su Ming once again, but he did not provide anyone with this piece of information. This was a secret hidden at the bottom of his heart. In fact, when Su Ming was forced into Western Ring Nebula's foreign land, Yi Wang had gone to the periphery and watched it quietly for a long period of time. He had no grudge against Su Ming, but there was an obsession in his heart. That obsession was born from his pride, and that was why he wanted to kill Su Ming personally, to wipe off the traces of him ever reaching a tie with someone else from the same generation. This obsession was also because of his loneliness. In his solitary and dull life, he believed there to only be one person who had the right to be his friend, but he had a limited understanding of that particular word. "It's been a long while," Su Ming said softly and walked into the room, going in front of Yi Wang and sitting down. There was a table between them, and there was wine on that table. Yi Wang had brought it out to drink alone. Su Ming looked at Yi Wang. This person was a man who had been the center of attention in what happened in the past. But it did not matter where he was, he looked as if he was used to being the center of attention all the time. No matter if someone judged in terms of power, potential, or even appearance, he looked as if he was loved by the universe. This was a similarity he shared with Dao Kong, but there was still a difference between the two of them. One was cold, and the other sinister. Su Ming picked up the pot of wine and poured a full cup for himself and another for Yi Wang. He gently picked his wine cup up and looked at Yi Wang. The man was silent. The complicated emotions in him had yet to disappear. He looked at Su Ming, and after a long time had passed, he too picked up his wine cup. "This cup is for the first time we met each other as berserkers." Su Ming finished the wine in one gulp. Yi Wang quietly finished the wine, and once he placed the cup by the side, the complicated emotions in his eyes became even greater. He looked at Su Ming and did not speak for a long period of time. Su Ming, too, did not speak. The two of them sat quietly in the room. It was silent all around them. Not a single sound could be heard. It was as if this region had been wiped off from worldly Star City. When the time taken for 2 incense sticks to burn passed, Yi Wang sighed softly. "You've changed a lot. The first time we met, you did not know what your preordained fate was. The second time we met, we were already in the barren lands of divine essence. You've also changed a lot. Right now, you're already in the middle stage of world plane realm, and by the looks of it, you will only need another 1,000 years before you reach completion in it." An ancient look slowly appeared on Su Ming's face, one that even he did not notice himself. Yi Wang was already at the middle stage of world plane realm. With this sort of cultivation, it could be said that he had fully brought out his potential. Yi Wang had not been walking down the cultivation for a long time. Without many years behind him, he had reached the middle stage of world plane realm with just his own abilities. This was something Su Ming could not hope to compare. If he did not have his Yikang clone and the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. In fact, if Su Ming was not an abyss builder, then at that moment, he would perhaps not even have the right to sit in front of Yi Wang. After all, Su Ming's true level of cultivation was just at the peak of heaven cultivation realm. Even if he worked much harder than Yi Wang, even if he went through more hardships, and even if the things he had to give up far surpassed the amount Yi Wang had to give up since everything had gone off smoothly for him, it wouldn't matter. Sometimes, potential was something that could not be overcome no matter how much blood, sweat, and tears a person shed to try and surpass someone talented. Not small, Compared to you, my speed of training is still too slow. Yi Wang picked up the pot of wine. Once he filled his and Su Ming's wine cups, he swallowed the contents of his cup in one gulp. "I have always believed that the world is fair. The weak will remain weak no matter how hard they will train, they will never become powerful. As for the strong, they will become stronger and continue until they reach the peak. This is the structure of the world I understand. Your potential is very average, but you managed to walk in front of me. Is this what they mean when they say that the dumb bird flies first?" Yi Wang poured another cup and drank. Even though his pride and his personality did not allow him to fit in with other people, his final sentence contained a hint of provocation. Su Ming smiled faintly. He picked up his wine cup and drank from it. A profound look appeared in his eyes. This so-called "the dumb bird flies first" is a huge cosmic lie and a joke, because there are far too many average people in the world. We need a form of consolation and motivation. This lie is a form of happiness, a beautiful thing that brings joy and allows a person to willingly immerse themselves in it, until they can no longer free themselves. I am indeed a dumb bird. I don't have that shocking talent of yours which makes you the center of attention wherever you go. This is the meaning of unfair, Su Ming said after he put down his cup. Yi Wang fell silent. A contemplative look appeared in his eyes. After a long while, he cast his gaze outside the window. You have indeed stepped in front of me. This has nothing to do with being fair or unfair, but I'd like to hear what sort of enlightening remarks you have about this so-called fairness in the universe. Yi Wang shook his head, and his gaze fell on Su Ming's face once again. His eyes were bright, as if there were emotions causing them to shine. He was an incredibly calculative man. Since his level of cultivation was not comparable to Su Ming's, then perhaps he could open a gap in Su Ming's heart. An error in terms of understanding an epiphany would usually cause a person's level of cultivation to stop at a certain realm, and he would never be able to advance it any further. However, to create this gap, he would need to find a crack in Su Ming's heart based on his words and then make that crack larger. This was a divine ability from Morning Dao sect, and Yi Wang had seen it being used before. Someone asked me that question before. He asked why others treated him unfairly. Su Ming pondered over it, then looked at his empty wine cup before saying calmly, "This world has always been unfair. Those who have the delusion of seeking fairness will only meet a miserable end." Oh. Then why would they still have that sort of beautiful expectation for fairness? Yi Wang's eyes flashed with a faint light. Su Ming's words were something worth contemplating. He felt that there was another meaning to them. These beautiful lies must exist. Even if people might seek something for their whole lives without obtaining any result, but they would still have sought something. As long as they search for it, there is a chance that they can turn something decaying into something amazing. Because as long as they continue searching, there is a chance that they will discover an area in which they are stronger than other people. Even if my potential in the path of cultivation is not great, perhaps I am better than others in terms of handling people. Even if I am not that good at handling people, perhaps I have something I am good with in terms of creation. There will always be something that suits me. There will always be a skill I am good with in which others can't compare to me. From this alone we can say that the universe is still fair. Su Ming looked at the wine cup and remembered his identity as an abyss builder as well as his inborn ability to possess clones. He was a dumb bird, but if he did not have the beautiful lie to support him and that desire to pursue something he was good at because he was unwilling to accept his current situation, he would not have found his forte while looking for his strength. What is it that you want to say? Yi Wang fell silent. After a long while, he lifted his head and looked at Su Ming. He had not found a single crack in Su Ming's heart from his words. Instead, he had a feeling as if he had been led into his train of thought. What was the plan against me which you participated in the past in true Morning Dao world? Su Ming asked calmly as he smiled faintly. You won't want to know, Yi Wang said softly. This is also my answer. Su Ming smiled. A focused glint appeared in Yi Wang's eyes. He looked at Su Ming, and a pensive look gradually appeared in his eyes. Su Ming then said, "Let me tell you a story. This is a memory I saw in someone's mind. In a mortal world there was once a rich man who wanted to build a house, which was why he searched for a carpenter. The rich man looked down on the carpenter because he had plenty of servants and he could decide the carpenter's life and death as he pleased. He believed that the carpenter was a lowly existence. The carpenter behaved himself. He was used to gazes and words that made light of him. He quietly helped the rich man build his house, but when he finished it, he kept all the sharp corners of the wooden items in the house based on his knowledge. There were also quite a large number of thresholds on the ground, which made the house look incredibly gorgeous. It doesn't matter whether he left them around for feng shui or so that he could create potential dangers, since the carpenter did not expect himself to be able to get any money for his work. 10 years after he left, the rich man fell down and knocked into a sharp corner of one of the wooden objects. Then, he died. Su Ming put down the wine cup he had been toying with in his hand and stood up. If you understand this story and the things I said previously, then help me do one thing. If you don't, then I will bid farewell to you now. As Su Ming spoke, he turned around and walked towards the door. Yi Wang was stunned as Su Ming's words echoed in his head. At the instant Su Ming moved one of his feet out the door, Yi Wang lifted his head. Are you telling me what constitutes as being strong? Being a prodigy with great potential is not strong, for sometimes there are people who could devise fatal attacks with their own strengths. When you return to the land of immortals, please go to Yin Death region and take care of my senior brothers. Su Ming did not turn his head back. He walked out of the room and disappeared into the darkness. He walked through a quiet silver stream. When he was in Yi Wang's room just then, Su Ming had dispelled the final shred of thought of wanting to possess him. This sort of person should not die from being possessed. If he lived, he would make this universe slightly more interesting. If he lived, then the Tao Su Ming had planted in his heart with his words would slowly grow and change Yi Wang's entire life. What constitutes as being powerful? You should find your own strength and persevere down that path. Don't care about how others are better than you in other areas, and then someday, we will all arrive at the same spot, the peak, even though we use different paths to come there. This is the true meaning of the dumb bird flies first. Yi Wang, if you do this, you will no longer be a prodigy, but will also become a dumb bird. Su Ming continued walking slowly. An enigmatic smile appeared on his face as he walked through the silver streams and past the people bowing respectfully to him as they continued hiding in the dark. Then, he walked out of Worldly Star City. At the instant he did so, he turned his head around and cast a gaze at the air. I do not like being watched like this. I hope that such a thing will not happen a second time between us. 1. Dumb bird flies first. A Chinese idiom that means those who are not as good as the others have to start earlier than the rest. Since the dumb bird metaphor is repeatedly used, I thought it would be best for me to keep this as how it is. Chapter 900. Preparation. They say that all forms of life in the world have a kismet. In a chamber within Worldly Star City were Elder Feng and Elder Yu, standing quietly in the room. There was a screen of light in front of them, and in the screen was Su Ming turning his head around. His gaze seemed to be able to penetrate the screen of light and land on their bodies. They heard what Su Ming said and fell silent. The Lord Fourth God of Berserkers is even more sinister than the first God of Berserkers, Elder Yu said in a low tone with a slightly odd expression on his face. This Yi Wang is a person who has tens of thousands of years' worth of kismet from the land of immortals gathered on him. That is why his potential is incredibly great. In a short time, he managed to reach the middle stage of World Plane Realm, and his future was boundless. After he joined Morning Dao sect, he also took away part of true Morning Dao world's kismet in an unseen manner. This kismet is formless, and plenty of people believe that it doesn't exist, but it would allow him to grow strong in true Morning Dao world. Kismets are abstruse and insubstantial, but in the end, just like when the Lord First God of Berserkers gathered all the land of Berserkers kismet on him, all those who have a kismet in their bodies must do something that coincides with it, or else they will clash against that kismet, and at that time, their kismet will begin scattering away, and it will slowly disappear. If this Yi Wang continued walking down his path of cultivation with his understanding, which is to look down upon all lives while being a prideful and solitary existence, then he would have conformed to his kismet. He believed that the world is fair, the weak should be weak, and the strong should be strong. If he continued like this, then his power would have become the might of heavens. He would have fused those kismets into his body, and when he spoke, his words would have become law, and he would have completed his Tao. But once the fourth God of Berserkers used his epiphany to disrupt Yi Wang's heart, it was left in chaos. Yi Wang originally wanted to find a crack in the fourth God of Berserkers' mind, but in the end, he was the one to fall into a trap. If he truly changed his mind, then from now onwards, he will no longer have a personality that will look down upon all lives. Instead, a new personality will form in his heart, and he will no longer believe that he was a prodigy from the bottom of his heart. At that time, he will truly cease to be a prodigy, and since his kismet will no longer conform to his personality, it will swiftly dissipate. Then, he will become a dumb bird. Elder Feng and Elder Yu shook their heads. However, as they watched Su Ming leaving into the distance through the screen of light, a hint of surprise appeared in their eyes. I can only guess that he did so because Yi Wang wanted to kill him. That killing intent was related to Yi Wang's personality and the kismet in him. This prodigy's kismet would not allow him to have anyone oppressing him. Even if he reached a tie with someone, he would consider it a loss, and he would have to kill his opponent to maintain his outlook of looking down upon all lives. But I think that our Lord Fourth God of Berserkers should have other motives in doing this. Elder Yu said with hesitation. Could it be related to Dao Kong? A glint appeared in Elder Feng's eyes. The two of them looked at each other, but they could not be certain of it. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. During these 3 days, many cultivators from the worlds beyond Black Ink Planet arrived like a swarm of bees, turning Black Ink Planet incredibly lively. Members of alien races from Divine Essence Star Ocean also came every single day. Their clothing, habits, and everything were different from cultivators, and as they arrived, they immediately caught plenty of attention. On the 4th morning, Black Ink Auction was launched. This was a grand auction that only occurred once every few hundred years on Black Ink Planet. It was not held in one of the 3 great cities, but high in the sky. With Blackwater City being the main and worldly star city as well as Ink Kirene City being the subsidiaries, rays of powerful light shone up. They intersected in Black Ink Planet's sky. The principle was similar to worldly star city's Night City. As the powerful rays of light intersected with each other, an auction hall that surpassed the size of a city appeared out of thin air. That auction hall was oval-shaped and immeasurable. It could accommodate millions of people and had a huge platform at the center. The edges of the platform were filled with illusory screens of light so that people from farther away would be able to see the item that was on the platform clearly. When morning arrived, relocation runes shone ceaselessly within this gigantic auction hall. There were also long arcs that rushed to the place from all directions. This time, there were about 2 million cultivators and members of the alien races from Divine Essence Star Ocean participating in Black Ink Auction. They would either arrive via relocation runes or fly up themselves. Gradually, the auction hall was packed densely with cultivators. There were also various huge rooms located all around the auction hall. These were prepared for those of high status. The people from the forces of power from the 4 great true worlds were scattered in these rooms. In fact, most of the members of the alien races from Divine Essence Star Ocean were also in the rooms. There were also some cultivators who did not want others to know about their identities, so they spent a large amount of crystals in exchange for the right to enter these rooms during Black Ink Auction. This auction would last for a month, and every single day, a large amount of items would be put on auction, which was worthy of its reputation. Su Ming sat in a room that belonged to him. The area in front of him was empty, and he could see the huge screens of light on the auction platform. He could also almost see the complete picture of the auction hall. The 13 old men from the Yu family stood behind him quietly, and Yu Ru had also returned. She looked as quiet and elegant as ever, but there was something slightly different about her. At that moment, she stood beside Su Ming, her gaze on the auction hall. We've made arrangements for Dao Kong to enter room 7. There are 9 old men beside him, and these people practically never leave his side. There is also another one by his side. Based on Elder Feng's investigations, there is indeed a powerful warrior of Lunar Kalpa realm by his side as well, and it is a woman. She is skilled in hiding, and she should have been sent to his side to protect him. Based on what we understand of Morning Dao sect, this woman is definitely someone from True Morning Dao World's Phoenix sect. According to their traditions, she should become Dao Kong's wife in the future, Lai Shan Kangju explained as he stood by Su Ming's side. The 3,000 fearless warriors from True Morning Dao World were left behind on the plains beyond Blackwater City. They formed a relocation rune, and the key to it is on Dao Kong. He only needs to send a divine thought, and the 3,000 fearless warriors will be relocated to his side. Also, when Lai Shan Kangju said these words, a loud boom that sounded like a huge wave crashing on the surface of water suddenly rang through the auction hall. This sound was formed by the voices of millions of people in the auction hall, and it could drown out even a thunderclap. A lyrical melody echoed throughout the entire auction hall. At that moment, 3 middle-aged men appeared on the platform surrounded by screens of light. These 3 people had smiles on their faces, and they wrapped their fists in their palms to bow to all the people in the hall. The auction has started. Su Ming cast a glance at the crowd creating all the noise. He lifted his right hand and swung his arm, and immediately, a screen of light appeared in the empty space in front of him. It dispelled all the sounds from the world outside, and the room immediately fell silent. Continue. Su Ming averted his gaze. He was not interested in the auction. The only thing he was interested in was Dao Kong. Dao Kong also has subordinates in the 9 galactic ships. They are currently floating around Black Ink Planet, and they have already locked onto the auction hall. If any accident happens, they will attack and destroy the place. There might be quite a lot of internal strife among the four great true worlds, but there are also some factions who are working together. If anything happens to Dao Kong here, the cultivators from the other three great true worlds will also attack, Lai Shan Kangju said in a low tone. He did not know why Su Ming was aiming at Dao Kong, but while killing Dao Kong was easy, the troubles that would come afterwards would be hard to deal with. Has the rules in the auction been altered? Su Ming asked calmly. We have already made arrangements, Lai Shan Kangju quickly said. When Dao Kong disappears, I will need you to, by the time, to take 30 breaths. Su Ming lifted his right hand and swung it at the screen of light, which immediately distorted and revealed the sights of the world outside. At the same time, the sounds from the area outside once again reached his ears. As a sign of gratitude for all of you fellow Taoists who attended Black Ink Auction, this time, all of the three greatest families and all other families within Black Ink Planet have made some changes in the rules of the auction. Do not worry, everyone. This change in the rules is incredibly beneficial for all of you. In the past, only when the auction had ended would we send the items you bought in the auction to you. However, this time, we have changed the rules. The moment you buy an item, it will be immediately delivered to your hands. Because of this, if you want to leave early, it will be much easier for you to do so. This matter has been mentioned by quite a number of Taoists in the past, and this time, the families in Black Ink Planet have decided to implement this suggestion. Su Ming watched the auction outside and listened to the noise with his usual calm expression. Lai Shan Kangju looked as if he wanted to say something as he stood by the side, but in the end, he chose to obey Su Ming's words. He nodded, announced his leave, and left. Su Ming's heart was calm at that moment. Everything was going according to his plan. Right then, all he needed was to wait for the fish to take the bait, and he would obtain his third clone, his cultivation-based clone. Su Ming narrowed his eyes and waited silently. He looked at the items put on auction and listened to the intense cries from the people as they placed their bids. Their voices rose and fell, and the world seemed to bubble with excitement because of them. Up to that point, not a single sound calling out a bid came from the room in which Dao Kong stayed, but Su Ming was not in a hurry. When noon arrived, the sun in the sky shone brilliantly. When another item was brought out and plenty of voices called out to place their bids, Su Ming heard a woman placing a bid from Dao Kong's room. Get ready, Su Ming said flatly. The 13 progenitors from the Yu family immediately sported solemn expressions on their faces. They swiftly sat down and surrounded Su Ming, forming a circle that was 100-something feet big. With brightly burning eyes, they started circulating their cultivation bases. As for Yu Ru, she moved back and sat down by the door of the room. Her duty was to prevent all people from entering. By her side was the Duke of Crimson Flame. He would be defending that door with her.